My practice is a provincial and interprovincial practice. It's primarily Ontario-based, but we assist families with kids with special needs across Canada and in the States and in England and Isle of Man and, pretty well everywhere, but primarily Ontario, of course. We're now reaching out to Barbados.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a little good fun, eh? We have a Marie online as well now, so that's
yes. Good. So she's a staff member of mine, but she has a brother who's has special needs. So welcome to join us if she's going to try to get some information for her parents.
So we're reaching out to Barbados. I've been going there for a number of years, and we're now working with the local bar association and the Society of Trust and Estate Practitioner chapter and so on, because the needs are the same. It's just certain things change.
Right.
Henson trusts are effective in all the common law provinces, common law countries. So it's a provincial and interprovincial practice. We do, 13 or 14 things that are a one-stop shop for families with kids with special needs. And it's a womb-to-tomb procedure as well. So the assistance we provide can be from any time after the child is born until the child dies, including when the parent passes on and probate and setting up the Henson trust, and in the meantime doing tax work and ODSP applications and guardianship and all those things. So we'll cover most of these details. Carol, would you like to say a few words to introduce your group?
Yeah, now, are we not going to see the attendance? We won't see everybody who's coming on. It's just...
Well, we've got 6 attendees.
So can they see me?
I presume so, yeah.
And can I see them?
No, not unless we invite them in to be panelists.
Okay.
I can add them on if you wish.
Yeah, I just think it's nice to get that so they can see me and feel more comfortable, I guess.
If you like, sure. Karen, can we add people in so that if they wish, they can see and be seen?
I'm going to try to figure this out right now, but everybody can see you when you're talking, Carol.
Okay, yeah. That's fine. We'll see if we can add them. So yeah, so I just want to thank everybody for coming. I'm wanting to get more people involved, but I think if Kenneth is okay with that, once we do this one, maybe we can do a follow-up one.
Sure.
And I just wanted to kind of, I think, talking to Kenneth, I think that the parents, as we were saying, are the most knowledgeable about what they need for their children. I can do on my end, I can do the programming, I can help them get ready, but get ready for what? What is beyond this, and how will it be financially supported? What do the parents have to put in place? You as parents put in place in order to have that happen. I was saying also that I hear too many times that, well, what about if something happens to me? I want parents to not get to that point. I've seen it before. Where the family unit has broken down because they've waited so long and now they're in a panic state. I don't want that to happen to my parents of my program.
Yeah.
I want there to be things in place so that it's like, let's just live our life day to day and not so concerned about what their future looks like, their own futures as well as their children.
Sure. Well, that is the thing. Is the two questions or statements. I just want to live a day longer than my child, or what will happen to my child when I'm gone, right? And of course, I've had those scenarios.
And the financial side of it. I mean, there's more money to be tapped into. I know there is. I know some of these parents are working on $3,000 to $5,000. Yeah. There has to be more out there for them. Some of them have quite a bit more, but how do they get to the point? And it's so overwhelming. It's so overwhelming, and how to get to the point to be able to financially provide for your child, just not in their day-to-day home, but outside of their home. And I just can't believe seeing the difference in parents that are getting 5,000, parents that are getting 20,000. How can we help them all so that they're all on the same playing field?
Well, let's see what we can do here. So just to give it the whole thing context, these are the statistics on the number of people on ODSP between ages of 18 and 65 on ODSP. And you'll see here, if you look at the bottom box here, you'll see that of the total of 378,000 people on ODSP between ages of 18 and 65, So that excludes about a third of the same number. You'll see here that here's the number, here's the total. But if you add in the under 18 and over 65 seniors that were on ODSP, it's about a third more. So it's roughly 478,000 or something like that, right? So if you then take the number of households in the province, which is based on the number of people, StatScan says that if you divide the number of people by 3, this gives you approximately the number of households. And then if you take the number of people on ODSP and then make a conservative estimate of how many people, are not in this number, which is under 18 and over 65, you can see easily that it would be 478,000. So that's one household in 10 that is the parent household of a child with special needs. I mean, it's mind-boggling, right?
It's mind-boggling.
So, I mean, what other community do you know that is more than 10%? It's not the Jewish community, it's not the Muslim community, it's not the Italian community, it's not the Chinese community, right? It's a very large community. It just is much splintered. And when we do our surveys of, like, we knew the answers before we asked the survey, right? But we asked to send a survey, well, these are the things that clearly we commonly see that could be done to the advantage of our client families. And we've told you about them, and they're obvious to you. It's not like you don't know. And you've attended several of our webcasts. What is it that's holding you back from doing these obvious beneficial things? And, we create boxes for people to tick, like, don't know if it'll be too expensive, and afraid of lawyers, and fear of dying, and, various things, all that sort of standardized stuff. But the single biggest thing, about like 40%, is I've been really too damn busy with my kid, right? And so we get that, right? So you'll see here that of all the 378,000, approximately 13%, 48,233. Can you see that number there? Is that clear?
Yep.
Is my little cursor visible to you? Okay. So you can see that the ones that are room and board, these are the kids at home, are 48,233. And of the 8 people that registered, all but 1 have their child at home with them.
Because the waiting list is...
True, that's true. So you can see 48,000 of 378,000 are still at home, and they are typically the younger ones, typically. It could be that they're children who will remain at home with the parents until the parents pass on. It's possible. And it's interesting that in some cases, the parents can remain in the home as they age longer because they have their child with them. Because as they age, perhaps the child can shovel the snow and carry the lawn, carry the groceries, and perhaps even drive the car, But, and you can see here that the rest of them says they're renters. And these ones, 261 says that they are private renters. And 332,000 are subsidized. 19,000 actually own a home from the looks of it. Now this slide here, this gives the breakdown of the type of disability. It doesn't really speak to dual diagnosis or those sorts of things, but you can see that here is the number for developmental disabilities. I don't know where autism would fit into this. I have to find out. Here are physical disabilities. And here's a psychosis and neurosis. So these are the emotional health issues, 43%, that's substantial.
Mm-hmm.
And here are the numbers for those percentages. So here's the developmental disability number, 67,000. That's quite interesting, eh?
Yeah.
And I see that they've got these grouped as like dual diagnosis. This shows you how many people on ODSP there are in a given community. So would you consider your community Ottawa, or would it be some other community that?
I think Ottawa. I think we're
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's
considerate of Ottawa.
there's Ottawa, municipality of Ottawa. So you can see that if Ottawa has a population of, let's say, arguably 1 million, then 333,000 households, arguably. So if you have 25,496 people on ODSP, then you typically have 25,496 parent households. And all we need is 33,000 to be 1 in 10.
Wow.
This number here, the 2024, that's what's called assistance for children with severe disabilities, which is not based on the severity. It's based on the kid being under 18 and the parents having a low income, like a single income household. Could be a single parent, could be a single income household where the income is, for example, less than 45,000. And they could receive up to $450 a month for ACSD. So you can see here that 25,496 in 2024, you know, as soon as you add in a few more households from the kids that are under 18, you're at 33,000, right?
Yeah, you're already there.
Let's see. Karen says, I have 3 children in total and 2 boys have autism in the 20s. So what you have is a situation where the number of households might, oops, what's this? Number of households that has 2 children decreases the number of households in total, perhaps, but it's still 2 kids. So here we talk about benefit increases. Once the child turns 18, as they're approaching 18, they apply for ODSP. Perhaps they have developmental disabilities, delays. Perhaps they have more severe autism. And so they get involved with Developmental Services Ontario, DSO, and DSO assesses them and decides that, yes, they're one of us. So they get a letter, the parent gets a letter to indicate the DSO has taken them onto their lists. And they use this letter when they're applying for ODSP to get around having to do the medical return, the DAU medical, because they're automatically approved if they get the DSO letter. And then, of course, financially, the child has no income or assets in 99% of the cases. So they're accepted on the basis that they can't function in a competitive workplace, can't function in the community, or can't handle personal care, depending upon the level. So in a lot of these cases, there's six of them here. The child's at home, they're slotted into 896. That's not what it always is. So what we do is we're able to break them out of that and into 1169, which is shelter plus supplementary, by setting up a lease arrangement, so-called, between the parent and the child. And the parent signs a lease, the child signs a lease. The rental income, quote unquote, is not rental income to the parent because you're not in search of profit. So you don't declare it as rental income. That would be contrary to the whole idea, right? And we do these leases to say that the child will contribute $550 a month to the household. Parents receive it, it's not taxable. They could even give it back to the child, and that would be fine too. And they get $273 more a month. We also do a shopping and cooking assessment because there's the 2 aspects. There's room and board. Room we deal with by way of this lease, and board we deal with by way of shopping and cooking. So we ask if you take the child to a grocery store with a shopping list, even if it's a picture list, could they fill the cart and take them to the checkout? Could they pay with a debit card or a tap?
And if they could, then.
And then you say, well, okay, so you're with them, of course, and you take them home. And they take the groceries inside. Would they know what to put in the freezer? And then, you know, as far as cooking, a lot of people say, well, you know, I don't let my child use the stove. And of course, in a lot of these cases, they've never, you know, I don't mean this in a negative way, but mom has always done the cooking. You know, it never occurred to mom to not do the cooking. Well, if mom didn't do the cooking, would the child be able to make certain meals themselves, things they wanted to eat? Could they, nuke them in the microwave, heat them up, make breakfast cereal, make a sandwich, you know, this sort of thing. And then we write this up on our letterhead, and we submit it to the different offices around the province. And in due course, normally, if we submit them, if we think that it's reasonable, if we submit them, the child gets the increase.
So the child gets the increase if they can't do those things?
If they can.
If they can do them?
Yeah, if they can shop and cook to some extent, and if they can make their mark on a lease, then we can generally get them approved.
Wow.
Yeah. This is the most common thing for those.
It's called a lease?
Well, it's a lease. It's a lease. It's a bona fide legal lease. Saying that they will pay $550 a month to the parent as a landowner, property owner, you know. But the parent doesn't have to declare it any more than they declare the room and board.
And they get how much of an increase?
$273. So
helpful right there.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise the kid's going to stay at the $896 until they move out or go into supported living or, you know, something like that.
See, that kind of information from my parents, and I think they can all agree is useful. That's kind of information they can use, right? It's only a little bit right now, but this is the kind of information they need to know. It's the wording. It's all about the form you're handing in, the wording. You know, nobody wants to declare them incompetent, because then what are you setting your child up for? Incompetency. And if you set your child up for being competent, then they're going to decrease. You know, it's a game. It's a game.
So we find that we succeed. We find that the parents get a lot more pushback than we do. We also find that if the parent tries and does not succeed, because we have no problem with the parent trying, but if they attempt it and don't succeed, which, as I say, they get more pushback than we do, then it's really hard for us to fix it. So what would be prudent is to have this kind of discussion with Karen of my office. She's the one that does this work, and to make an assessment of whether you want our assistance. Of course, there's fees involved, obviously, but whether you want assistance or whether you want to try it yourself. If you do, great, but it's harder for us to fix it if you don't succeed. We are receiving the higher amount thanks to you. Thank you. However, we don't have a lease in place. Is this an issue for us? No. If you have been able to deal with your child's ODSP worker and they have not pushed back, and you have said that the child is giving you so much, $550, let's say, for shelter each month, and they have bought that, that's fine. That's all you need.
Can the person that just...
Yeah, talk, Karen, go ahead.
Oh, the person that just wrote that he does have a lease. He may not be aware that that was a lease. He has one.
I see, thanks.
If that helps.
So is the lease is something they get from you, or you can help them with, but
that's right.
Where do they obtain this form?
Yeah, we stick handle the process.
Okay.
That would be for a discussion with Karen if somebody's interested. No, it's not, Scott. It's not retroactive, unfortunately. The disability and caregiver credits. Okay, so the disability and the caregiver credits. So I see that all of these kids are approved for the disability tax credit, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. The caregiver credit comes into effect when the child turns 18. It's the parent's credit, unlike the disability credit, which is transferred from the child. So the caregiver tax credit is the parent's credit. It's easier to put in place if the disability credit is also in place. It saves one piece of paper that we need to get this activated. And what it does is it kicks in when the child turns 18 and lives at home. And then as of 2017, even if they don't live at home. So there's one parent here, Susan, who's not, oh, there she is. Hi, Susan. So Susan is taking part. That's great. So Susan, it says here that your child is not at home and is getting the higher amount. This is great. You see, it's only the parent that gets the lesser amount. When the child is not at home, either they or the support institution that they deal with, they get the higher amount. It's just the parent who doesn't get the higher amount. So, we do what we can to correct this inequity. But with respect to the caregiver tax credit, Susan, depending upon how old your child is, up until the end of 2016, the caregiver credit was only effective if the child was living at home with the parents. But then in 2017, they changed and they removed the reside with criteria. So even if a child is not living at home, but you are still his caregiver, then you can use the caregiver credit as of 2017. And the neat thing for me is that if you look at this, you'll see that until the end of 2016, only the 48,233 who had their child at home with them could have used the caregiver credit. But as of 2017, I would say almost all of the 378,000 families could use the caregiver credit. This is big, right? This is big because what it does is it reduces your taxes, the parents' taxes, by $1,000 a year. So it was saving 48,000, potentially if they were using it, it was saving 48,000 families $1,000 a year. Now it's saving potentially 378,000 times 1,000. That's a big number. That amount of money every year. Like we've added up the number of, for example, leases that we've done, and cumulatively, it's in the millions of dollars that our client families save every year. This is good. And similarly, people just don't know either about the caregiver credit, even if the kid's at home, or that they did use it and then the child moved out and they understood that they had to reside with them, which was true until 2017. So perhaps they ceased using it. And we get a lot of families where the child leaves home and the parent is led to believe by some information that they've received from some source that they can't use the disability credit if the child is not living with them, which is clearly not correct. So we just fix these things, And then, of course, all of these kids are approved for the disability credit, which means that they can have a registered disability savings plan. And if you contribute $1,500 a year, the child receives $4,500 a year for a total of 20 years. And we'll get to the accumulations link in a second, but it's firstly, contributing $1,500 and getting $4,500 is a pretty good deal. And was brought in by Mr. Flaherty of the last Conservative government, who's now deceased, who had a child with disabilities. But you can see here that simplistically, it adds up to big numbers by the time the child is 60. But these numbers are understated. They don't properly take in the compounding of interest effect, but we'll get to that. I don't need to talk much about this because the criteria for the ODSP benefits, it's already been settled for everybody here. Here are the two amounts. And the child could receive from any source. They increased it September 1st, 2017. They increased it from 6,000 over 12 months to 10,000. So if you happen to have a scenario where the child is receiving money from some source, a grandparent, for example, they can now receive 10,000 over 12. And at the same time, the asset test was increased from 5,000 to 40,000. So that means
Can you explain that?
Yeah, the asset test was increased from 5,000 per child to 40,000. So they can each have $40,000 now. So if you are letting the ODSP accumulate, which some people do, then if you want to accumulate it in the child's hands instead of your own, then you could let it grow to, $40,000.
Really?
Yeah.
Mind you, I don't think parents can let it grow right now. They're using every nickel, penny and dime to.
That's exactly correct, Jen.
Yeah.
This is an interesting thing. As of September 27th this year, if you happen to have to stay home with the child because of COVID for one reason or another, either their program has closed or people can't come in to care for your child, these sorts of things, then you can receive up to $500 a week. But that's only if in 2020 or 2019 you earned at least $5,000. You have to have worked. So if you didn't work and now you can't work, then you could get $500 a week for up to 26 weeks while you're in quarantine. Your child is home from school or can't go to programs.
That's probably not retroactive either, though, eh?
It is.
Oh.
Yeah, it's retroactive if the facts comply. It's retroactive to September 27th.
So how about a parent that's a stay-at-home mom?
But did she work?
Yeah, I don't know.
Right, exactly.
They have somewhere they can show that they made $5,000 or more.
That's right.
Then they can apply for this.
That's right.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah, it's good to know. There will be people to whom it is useful.
Pretty much everybody would think so. I don't know anybody who wouldn't want $500 a week, right? To stay at home.
That's good. So this is the disability credit, but I think everybody here knows about that. This is, again, the caregiver. And what we do, we have 13 or 14 different things that we do for families. So it's sort of a one-stop shop. And one of the things that we do all the time is identifying when the disability credit or the caregiver credit is not being used, and we then put it in place and backfile it up to 10 years. For example, if you get the disability credit approved and backfiled, then you can set up an RDSP, and you can also make retroactive contributions to get the grants and bonds. Plus, in a simplistic situation, we backfile the credit against the tax-paying parent and recapture about $16,000. And similarly, if the child was 28, caregiver credit kicks in when they're 18, so 10 years. We would backfile the 10 years and get about $8,000 for the parent. So in lots of cases, we recapture like 24 grand. And then going forward, it saves them 1,600 plus 1,000 each year going forward. This is the caregiver credit. This slide says basically what I just said. And what we're working on is all of the people, all the families that don't know that as of 2017 this credit would apply. Now at present it's only 17, 18, 19, $3,000, but still it's $3,000. And of course, by the time it gets to 2027, it'll be 10 years and $10,000. Mm-hmm. And I intend to be here doing it. Right, so it's pretty simple. The RDSP, once you set it up based upon the child's income at the age of 18, even if you don't contribute, the government puts in a $1,000 bond as long as you file the kid's taxes. And then if you contribute $1,500 a year, the government puts in a further $3,500. We've got a question. I'm just going to jump to the side. Karen says, can ODSP be used for purchasing a home, for example, a townhouse? It's the child's income. So, if you wanted to purchase a townhome have the child live there, have them contribute $550 a month towards the shelter costs, and then you pay the rest. You could do that, but that's about as far as it goes. The child, of course, can't afford to carry a house. You'd still have to subsidize it to whatever extent. What are the benefits of an RDSP? Well, they're obvious. I'll just let you read this. Has everybody read that? And this is very interesting. If you have a category here where the child is born in a given year, and then they're approved for the disability credit because they are found to have autism, for example. And in this scenario, it's a low family income. What that means is that this fits for whether the child is a minor living with parents or they're over 18 and on ODSP, because this is basically the ODSP amount, right? And you invest the money, put in $1,500 a year. You get 5% interest or growth. You won't get interest, obviously, but you know, if you invested in mutual funds or equities of some sort, seg funds, and you earn 5%, which is realistic even in today's world, what you find, is that if you start paying in 2020, let's say, because then the kid's 20, right? And you make your contributions each year, and it's invested at 5% and it compounds, it ends up being about $700,000. Isn't that amazing? It's phenomenal. Thank you, Jim Flaherty.
And how much, putting in how much a year?
$1,500. And the disability tax credit reduces your taxes by $1,600. So it's self-funding.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did any of the parents out there know that?
Don't know.
I'm asking. I wonder if anybody can answer that.
So this is the kind of thing that we assess for, you know, with our intake forms. Now this 700,000, you can see here that it's contributed starting when the kid's 20 until they're 60, so 40 years. It's then 700 grand, give or take. And then there's a formula for the payout. Here it is. The formula for the payout, I won't go into all the details, but this is, you'll get these slides. It winds up paying, about $30,000 a year from age 60 for 23 years. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know, plus at age 60, they're still getting ODSP. And at age 65, now they're a senior. So now they get OAS and GIS of about 18,000, which is slightly more than the 14,000 shelter plus supplementary. So now they got 18,000 plus 30,000. They got $48,000 of income. That's more than most seniors. Of all the people that file tax returns in Canada today, 75% say that their income is less than 50,000. These kids will just be on the cusp of being the top 75% of all reported income earners or taxpayers in Canada. That's not too damn bad.
No.
I'm good with this.
Yeah, we have some questions there that maybe you can, while you're on this subject.
Okay. What's the penalty for cashing out? Well, if you don't wait 10 years after the last contribution for the grants and bonds to be vested, then if you take a dollar out, you lose $3, basically. It's simplistic, but if you take out your $1,500, you lose your $4,500, basically. Can the money be used at any time? No. It's essentially a retirement plan. You contribute for 20 years, you wait a further 10 years, that's 30 years. Now the kid is 48. And at that point, you could start to take money out. Let's see. So Karen, you're going to answer this question for Janet? Well, your name is Janet. Good. Owner is Janet. That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, how came out older?
Yeah.
It just means it's been
Karen,
answered.
were you going to
live.
answer? Sorry, go ahead.
When I type answer live, it just means somebody's answering it live as we speak. It's just sort of how we divide them.
Okay. Yes, my son had fully invested RDSP since day one. That technically that's December 2008, and that's approximately 114,000 so far, right? That's pretty damn good. That's in the last 12 years, I would presume. Says there is a cap on the government contributions. That is true. The government contributions are either $4,500 a year, or if you're buying back, if you're making retroactive contributions, the maximum is $10,500 grant per year to pick up arrears. You have to do it over a 4 or 5 year period. Okay, RDSPs, other considerations. So these are some technical aspects. A primarily government-assisted plan is one where the money, the $90,000 that the government has contributed is greater than what the person, the family has contributed. A primarily government-assisted plan is one where the total amount of private contributions are greater than or equal to the total amount of government contributions. It's pretty obvious, right?
Is there a type of investment, just going back to Janet's question, is there a type of investment where you can pull out early, where you can start saving now and then need it in an emergency, you can pull it out?
No, not without losing the grants and bonds.
Okay.
Now, that said, you see this one here, a specified disability plan. Well, if you can get a letter, and it's not complicated because we've got one going right now. If you can get a letter from a doctor saying that it's unlikely that your child will live more than 5 years, then there is a formula to draw up to $10,000 a year out. This is, I mean, obviously certain types of disabilities like Rett syndrome and so on, they would have this factor, but I wouldn't say it's the most common factor. Now this one has to do with managing your child's affairs after they turn 18. Because when they're 18 and older, they're adults. They're not minors, they're adults. And they're deemed to be competent, even though they may not be. Or they may be of a certain degree of competence, which is fine, of course. So what we do is we talk about legal guardianships and powers of attorney. Power of attorney is just like the power of attorney that all the parents have. They did a will, they signed a power of attorney, appointing their wife or their husband, their attorney for property and personal care, and maybe their brother as alternate. So if the child is competent or reasonably competent, then they can sign a power of attorney, appointing the parents and then perhaps appointing alternately a sibling, perhaps cousin.
I think, sorry, Kenneth, to interrupt you. I think that that what I've learned is that some of the parents, just because their child has a disability, or not just because their child has a disability, and they are not able to make life decisions. They can make some decisions. They can't make life decisions. They automatically speak for them. But if they're an adult and, like you said, it has some type of competency, they have to actually have that powers of attorney or some type of paperwork to say, because parents will say, well, he can't speak for himself, so I just will. If it ever came to a legal issue, they wouldn't have any leg to stand on.
That's right. That's what it comes down to. Now, I mean, it's true that the parent is probably the ODSP trustee. Okay, that's great. They're the account holder on the RDSP. Well, that's fine too. But if the child, is not clearly not competent, in which case the parent could be the substitute decision maker for personal care, just personal care. It's a gray area, and it's inevitable that at some point somebody is not going to tell you something.
It's an entitlement thing. I understand what the parents are saying completely, but it's, well, I'm the mother.
Yeah.
That trumps all, but it doesn't.
No, you're just a mother.
Not just a mother. Yeah. But yes, I know. In the legal system, you're just the mom.
That's right.
You're nothing else unless you have that. And I think a lot of parents do not know that.
And as well, this also makes it easier for us, for example, to get the disability tax, the ODSP benefits done, because then, you know, I mean, granted, ODSP may see the parent as ODSP trustee, okay, but you know, it's you're able to expedite different things if you have a power of attorney. Even if you're presently getting the cooperation that you have, you know, I mean, child, you know, okay, so they're no longer with their pediatrician, they no longer go to Chayer. You're getting cooperation, everything's fine, but it's inevitable that it will come to the point where something is not fine. Somebody will not tell you something. And so a power of attorney goes a long way to solving that problem.
Well, that's what, sorry, going back to the question Marcy was just saying, Marcy, you can't even get a paramedic to take them to the hospital if they're in crisis if you do not have power of attorney.
Sure. Yeah, so this is inevitably you're going to get to that spot. So whenever we can, we do powers of attorney. We take the presumption that the child is competent, although they may or may not be. If they are not, and it's obvious to whomever you present the notarial copy of the power of attorney that they're not, and you then don't get the cooperation that you need, well, then you have to seriously discuss legal guardianship. And this is something that people do at different points. Like we had 2 or 3 consults today with parents in their 60s and 70s about guardianship. And right now, there's no big issue. Right now, they've been able to, you know, trundle along and sort things out. But they're concerned, you know, because the child's health may be more delicate, or the parents are older. And what happens is the parents may get cooperation, right? They've been working with the same doctors and hospitals for decades. And so maybe that's okay. But then if they die, well, just as you have to have a trustee in the will to manage the Henson Trust, you have to have a personal representative to make sure that the group home takes care of them properly, and that the doctors listen to you, and that you are the new account holder on the RDSP, because otherwise it's only the parents. And now it's $300,000 and there's no account holder. And the kid turns 60 and they start to issue checks payable to the child, the beneficiary. Well, who's going to deal with the 30 grand a year? And who's going to apply for OAS and GIS? You know, all of these factors. So what happens is the parents at a certain point to say that, you know, this isn't something that they want to leave to their children, the siblings, to sort out. They want it sorted out. Now, when it gets to that comfort level or discomfort level, depends on people. I mean, you know.
What is the highest? What's a hierarchy in that? Is it what covers almost everything? Medical, financial, whatever. Is that the power of attorney? Does that almost trump all, or?
Well, the power of attorney is good, but it's it doesn't change the fact that it's supposed to have been granted by a competent person, and really wouldn't be optimally effective until that person is found to be not competent, because you're just a helper, right? The doctors and hospitals would always refer directly to this presumably competent person, right, who really isn't.
Right.
And the problem with that is that the doctors and hospitals think that they know better than you. And they do know a fair bit, but that doesn't mean they know more than you. because you're the experts, because you're the ones with the banker box or the file folders full of all the tests from day one and the names of all the doctors and the interns and the tests, the test results. You've got the whole goddamn dossier. And you're the one that gets everybody that all of a sudden steps into.
Well, you have the history, right? Some doctors, you're going to this doctor, he doesn't have the history of all this.
Right.
This next one doesn't have the history of all this, or, but the parent has everything.
That's
from
right.
birth to that point.
You're the one that brings everybody up to speed and says, no, you can't use that drug. Don't use that drug.
So what I'm asking is, what is that title that you can have that will give you a say?
Well, ultimately, in most cases, it comes down to legal guardianship if the child is not competent.
Okay.
And this allows you to have a succession plan. Just as you have a will and a trust for the child, you have a legal guardianship and a successor surviving guardian.
Like I know two of these parents on here right now, their children come off as very competent.
Sure. Well, then they should do powers of attorney at least to start with.
But one step up would be the guardianship.
Yeah. Now the child would have to be not competent to do this. Right. And if they're assessed and found to be competent, well, then you can't do the guardian.
What is the definition of competency?
Well, they're assessed by provincially approved capacity assessors. And it's a standardized question and answer test with a form with different boxes to tick. So it's all standardized. And what it does is it determines whether the person is competent to manage their property and their personal care, because there's two different levels. And what it comes down to is, do they understand that the light is red, but they don't appreciate that there's traffic? That kind of thing.
They don't have the defensive driving.
That's right. And or that they understand $5 and $50. They know 50 is more, but if anybody asked them for it, they would give it to them because they don't really understand what it's worth.
Competency can be disapproved, I guess. I mean, it's not hard to do that. They aren't really competent. Like, here's $50 and go buy your groceries, and they buy all chips.
Right.
Or they spend it all at Max Milk,
yeah,
and not at the grocery store.
And a lot of the kids are vulnerable. They're easily manipulated. They can be tricked into signing up for charge cards or phones that are then taken from them. Or, this is one of the concerns, that the child is vulnerable. Well, if you're their legal guardian, they can't enter into contracts. And even if they did, they couldn't be enforced.
We have one parent on here whose son signed up for an online card or something and didn't know any better, thought it looked good. Got himself some monthly amount taken out of his account.
That's right.
So that if you have that kind of proof, you can show that there's a certain level of competency or incompetency just by that simple measure, right? This child is online, he's buying this and that, or somebody has made him sign this contract. Well, that can be avoided or disapproved.
That's right.
Null and void because you have the guardianship or power of attorney and it says otherwise.
That's right. And it's very helpful, if you happen to be in a medical situation, because there's no question that there's a medical bias against people with disabilities and old people. And I think what it comes from is the triage system, where in the medical business, you're taught to have 3 boxes. Well, we can't fix that one, so he goes in that box, and we might be able to fix this one, and we can fix that one. And if you're a broken bicycle, then it wouldn't be unusual for them to say, well, I'm not going to fix the tires on a broken bicycle. And that's what it comes down to, both for people with disabilities and old people. Yeah. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
My thought is, this is from Janet, the life expectancy of an adult with Down syndrome is maybe 60. That could be true. It used to be very true. Now, of course, with heart surgeries and so on, cochlear implants and various things, kids do live longer. But yes, I wouldn't doubt that there's a reduced life expectancy of some sort. What there is a higher incidence of early onset dementia. We have a client family now where the son has Down syndrome, he's 55, and he has dementia. So the father, who's in his 90s, had over-contributed.
You can imagine.
Yeah, he lived with his dad until 3 years ago. His dad is 90.
You've got a 90-year-old man who probably has some form of dementia himself, and then you have a 55-year-old son who is already has dementia.
That's right. So he went to live with his brother for the last 3 years, but now it's too much for the brother and his family. So they've got him placed in a supported living situation, like a residence with a locked floor, just like everybody else. So because that's how it can work. And so, the RDSP has about 300 grand in it because the dad overfunded it and invested very wisely. And we have a letter from a doctor that he's unlikely to live more than 5 years.
Who? The dad or
the boy? So as a result, we have this section. Wherever the hell that is. It's anyway, you saw the one where if you're sick and you have a letter that says you're going to live more than 5 years, you can start to make early withdrawals of up to 10 grand.
Yes, okay, yeah.
So anyway, I think it's SDPD or something.
Where does that money go then?
Oh, it'll be paid to the boy. It has to be paid to the beneficiary.
Okay.
But what they need is an extra $3,500 a month, because the monthly amount is $4,500 for the residents, and so he'll continue to get his ODSP, but they need another $3,500 a month to pay for this residence. And over the next year or two, we're going to draw it all out.
But is this the right residence for him? Who knows, right?
Well, it's the same residence you'd have for any older person with dementia who happens to be, hale and hearty.
But some who don't even have dementia and are 35, 40, 50, but have nobody else, do go into these retirement homes or these old age,
That's right.
And that's not where they belong. No. But in this case, dementia, yes, I would say probably. But my concern is for these parents that are here and many more, that what can they do now? The choices these parents have are put them in subsidized housing. And I can tell you with 100% that subsidized housing, because this population is so vulnerable, is not a good setting for them. Right. So where do they come up with some money? And I know one of my parents here is subsidizing his rental income because she has no choice, because she looked at subsidized housing and you can walk outside and somebody can hand you some drugs, or somebody else can.
Yeah, you don't want your kid there. No.
It's subsidized housing is terrible. I'm sorry, but it's not for this population.
I remember a client family in Kingston, and they had put the kid on a list for subsidized housing, right? Because they thought that geared to income would be helpful. And we had a little chat, and I pointed out that in a lot of these cases, firstly, they're not going to get a spot. You can have your hopes pinned on it, but they're not going to get a spot because they're safe at home with parents. They're not going to get a spot. That's it. And even if they did get a spot, you wouldn't want your kid to live there. Yeah. So what they realized was that it would be better to not have a geared to income situation where the kid's shelter component goes down. It's better to get the full amount, although it's not adequate for rent. Yeah. Move the kid into a suitable apartment close to mom and dad, but not too close.
Right.
And pay the difference.
And what?
And pay the difference. Anyway, let's see. Can any of this funding be used to modify a home? Well, the RDSP, not now. No, of course not. There is a new program that is designed for seniors for accessibility. It just came out, but I'm quite sure that it could apply to the kids too, especially if the parents are elderly because they would just apply as if it was for them, but it's really for the child, you know. But other than that, any kind of accessibility stuff, you'd have to look at Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, because they have different programs for renovations and accessibility of houses. Okay, so
there's just one other question. What happens if the child dies before 60? Then
well, all of the contributions you've made, plus the growth, plus any vested grants and bonds, are paid out to the child's estate, to the child.
Oh.
And by succession law, the parents would receive it, long story short. And if the parents are gone, then if they're siblings, by succession law, the siblings would get it. So if you have a situation where, you know, you've been contributing for 10 years, you put 15,000 in, but none of the grants and bonds have vested, and we've had these scenarios happen, then the child gets back your 15,000 plus some growth. All the grants and bonds go to the government, and that's it. Okay, so this is a slide about powers of attorney. For personal care, this is one about property.
Yeah, they will get all these, right?
Yeah, everybody will receive these. This is a substitute decision maker. Under the substitute decision maker legislation, there's this hierarchy of if a person is not competent and there's no power of attorney, which because they're not competent and they're not legal guardians, for personal care only, who would be the substitute decision maker? And of course, for a child, it would be first the parents. If the parents are gone, then it would be siblings and so on. The problem is that the substitute decision maker still doesn't have the clout that is needed. Hospitals and doctors think that they know what's best, and they're just not inclined to give that up. And, you know, technically, what's supposed to happen is there's supposed to be informed consent. Well, you can't really have informed consent unless you've been informed, right?
Yeah.
And what happens is doctors and hospitals, God bless them, all the supporting professionals, the way I explain it is that if you look at all of the supporting professionals, including me, and with all due respect, Carol, all the supporting professionals in the context of the family, and you look at them in the context of an egg and bacon breakfast, the chicken's involved, but the pig's committed. And that's exactly how it works out with our families, you know. They've got skin in the game, right? Mm-hmm. And the doctors and hospitals may all be professional and do the best they can and try whatever they can. They may be completely, you know, they may be the one person that's unbiased and doesn't have a prejudice against people who are already a bit wobbly, but they don't have the same skin in the game.
It always looks good on paper. Here's what I'm going to suggest you do. Here you go.
Right.
Now throw them in the, I had a situation in school where he said, let him, if he gets anxiety, let him bounce a ball through the hallways when he's going from class to class. Okay, that sounds good on paper. Now throw 2,000 kids going through that same hallway. I have these therapists, you know, saying this will work. And I'm like, it doesn't. You can't present it that way. The parents will know. No.
This is a slide about guardianship. It compares guardianship and powers of attorney. It's an expensive process. We never try to sell it. We are very practical here. Powers of attorney are much cheaper, like just hundreds rather than thousands. And, you know, if you can get what you need now, you know, that's what we're in favor of. But you do have to think of the long term. And at a certain point, you know, you have to decide whether to use legal guardianship if the child is not competent or not. You know, we have two brothers that are with a community living group. They have been for some years. One of them's turning 60 this year, has turned 60. And his brother's, I think, 2 years younger. And they've been supported by this community living group that was in a home that their dad owned next to the family home. It was a duplex. And they lived there, they have for years, with two other guys, two men. And so now the dad's deceased, his wife's predeceased. So we're settling his estate. But one of the cousins that's younger than them is seeking legal guardianship. He's both the trustee of the Henson Trust in the will for the dad, the uncle, and he wants to seek legal guardianship of these two cousins, which is very creditable, right? But this community living group, the philosophy of community living, and generalizing, but the philosophy of community living is that everybody's supposed to live in the community. Okay, great. And they're opposed to legal guardianship on the basis that it somehow takes away from people their own agency. Well, there's no reason that the legal guardian can't continue to grant those guys as much agency as they can exercise, and they will. This cousin has no interest in trying to, somehow, I don't know, take over the kids' lives. But the community living group, which philosophically opposes this, are trying to set up. They're giving us resistance. All we want to do is have a capacity assessor meet with these boys, two of them actually, meet with these boys, assess them, find them not competent because they're not, and then have the cousin appointed legal guardian. And
but who do they think should be taking care of the estate then?
What it is, the community living group thinks that the boys should make all of their own decisions with supports.
And there goes the vulnerability right there.
Right, and no, it's laughable to me, because here we have a paid support worker thinking that it can give guidance on decision making to people for whom it's paid to take care. Right, you can't do that. You're doing your job, but you need somebody at arm's length who is the legal representative of those gentlemen to give you your marching orders and to make sure that you don't let any abuse happen to that child. We've got those files too.
Yeah.
Where the main motivation is the family comes to us because they're getting jerked around and they're not happy. And they just have to have bigger boots. Anyway, that's my little rant for the day, okay?
Okay.
So pensions. If anybody who's here has a pension for teachers, Homer's municipal employees pensions, a power generator, hydro, Bruce Nuclear, Pickering, Homer's OPG, teachers, OTIP, or WSIB, we're employed by WSIB. They are statutory provincial pensions. And if your child is an adult dependent at the time of your death, then they potentially can receive half of your original pension. So you can see that if you're a teacher, you could easily have a pension of $60,000, and a son who's 30 years younger than you, perhaps, with severe autism, for example, he's at Carrie's place. So, nevertheless, he's dependent. So when mom dies, the boy who's not competent would get a $30,000 pension. But of course, you need a legal guardian, his sister, to apply for the pension and to receive it and manage it. And you need to see how much you're going to wind up paying Carrie's place, because now he's not getting ODSP, but he still doesn't need $30,000 a year, right? Plus to manage his RDSP. Now, he's a little different. He's now 55, so he only has a couple of years of, if any, of RDSP. But you can see that, somebody needs to apply for his OAS when he's 65, and then to receive the checks. So it's a very interesting scenario, but you can see that most of these people that have these pensions are not aware of this. This brings us to Henson Trust. It's 10 after 7, so we'll just talk briefly. A Henson Trust is a particular type of trust that is put into a will. It doesn't come into effect until you pass on, second of you typically. If it's parents, two parents, it typically doesn't come into effect until the second one dies. So there's nothing to do, set up, fund, administer, pay until the second death. And say there were two kids, let's just say, and say the estate was divided 50% each way. So the 50% for the child with special needs would come out of the estate account and into a Henson trust account at a bank or an investment house. There's a procedure for this. And the trustee would then invest it prudently and then spend it wisely for the beneficiary. And there's no limit on how much it could have or what it could be dispersed on. You may have heard things. You may have heard things about certain limitations, but in practice there aren't. And these are some of the distinct wordings that you need to use. I won't go. Excuse me. I won't go into this very much, but if you know anyone who has a very sizable RRSP or RIF and has a child with a cognitive disability, you could set up a special type of trust that would basically roll over the RIF to the trust for the child, as you might to a spouse. And of course, you can put up to 170,000 into an RDSP. Let's see, these are, I won't go into those, I don't think. You'll get these slides. These are just some wordings, some vocabulary that is all part of this puzzle. This is a calculation for life insurance, just to show you how economical it can be. If you're a female 50 non-smoker, you're supposed to have a life expectancy of 35 more years at age 50. Now, the longer you live, the longer your life expectancy is because you didn't die. So if you're 82, your life expectancy is probably another 9 years. Well, that's more than 85, right? So if you were to buy a universal life, whole life, $100,000 policy, your premium might be $115 a month. That's $1,384 a year. But it pays $100,000 on death, perhaps into the Henson Trust, right? Well, if you were to take that annual premium and to save it every year instead of paying the premium, you'd have to save it, aside from compound interest, you'd have to save it for 72 years to have 100,000. That would make you 112, 122. Well, you're not going to make that because you're only going to live 35, theoretically. So you can see that it's probably a good investment, probably. And what it means is that you can segregate your concern about your child because you know they'll get at least 100 or however many multiples of 100 you can afford. Because of course, you see the 1,384. Well, the child is getting $1,169 a month once they're 18.
Right.
So you could fund 200,000 quite easily with a couple of months of ODSP. And all of a sudden, you've created an estate, or you've added to the trust on top of your estate, which is otherwise divided equally with all of your children, your 4 children, right? They all get a quarter, but then this child gets 200 grand more. And what happens in my experience, and I have a bit of it, is that the other kids can live with this. Like if you were to leave 50% to that child and divide 50% by the other 3, let's say, one of them might not understand, you know, because his brother's got an emotional health issue and he wants to know why he's never shaking it off, right? It's just goddamn depression. Why don't you just shake it off, kid, right? So he wonders why it is that that kid's got all the attention, all of his life, and now he gets more than the other 3 combined, plus $200,000, right? You have to give some thought to the family dynamics after you're gone as well. So this is worth thinking. We also find that it's useful if, say it's a second marriage, and you want to go into this second marriage with an open, loving heart, and you don't mind sharing everything you can, especially if you're a wife, because he's going to die first anyway. But aside from that, what you do is you segment your concern for your one boy with disabilities by setting up a trust with 200 grand when you die. And yes, it's true, your second husband has promised that, you know, if you predecease him, that he'll divide the estate between your 2 kids and his 2 kids, and he probably will. But what you've done is you've set this 200 grand up to some extent replace mother, because mothers are very expensive to replace, I find. But you've got this 200 grand that'll go some distance to replace mother. Are there any more questions? It's 7, just after 7.
Just after 7. So is there anything that you can do, and I think some of the parents amongst themselves can help to help them to reach, I mean, I don't know if you have much to do with, I guess you probably don't have a lot to do with the March of Dimes or passport funding.
I donate.
You donate? What?
To March of Dimes, yeah.
Yeah, no, I meant, yeah, March of Dimes, sorry, passport funding, well, the funding they get for communities, but so the one thing that you did say is that they can do this lease where they can get a little bit more for their ODSP. Is there anything else during this COVID, because COVID is very different than anything we've ever been through, that can help financially help parents besides that?
Well, what we do is we see if we can assist them to get the higher benefits. We see if they're making use of things like the caregiver credit, which often they're not.
Right.
We help them recapture that money.
Yeah.
It's true that passport is often just a modest amount, but then you just have to keep trying each year for a little bit more.
Yeah.
We're not really familiar with any other, but the parents know most of the time. The parents know, a lot of the programs better than we do, right?
Right.
As far as the peace of mind, we try to help people have peace of mind with a will with a Henson trust in it.
Okay.
The ideal situation for us is where we can assess a family situation, find out that there are taxes to recover, rebates that will help to pay for the cost of the will. Often, it covers the cost of the will, plus you walk away with money. And with respect to the benefit increase, getting them that money back too.
Okay.
It's not a lot, but it's $273 a month.
No. Yeah, that's helpful for sure.
So those are our initial core things.
Okay.
And then we also do help with legal guardianship.
Okay.
Like, for example, we've been doing a small number of new guardianship files now because there's a relatively new program. I should look into this maybe. It's family managed funding care funding, family managed care funding. You can Google that. And it's money managed by the LINs. The LINs pay money. And what's happened is it turns out that families are receiving this family managed funding prior to the child turning 18. And when they turn 18, they have to apply for legal guardianship. So you could look at family managed funding. Just Google that, family managed.
And I hear guardianship coming up more than power of attorney. So you would say,
yeah,
if you can get power of attorney, if you can get guardianship, that's the best way to go.
Yeah, we give a really objective assessment. I mean, we're clear on the costs. We're clear on whether you really need it now. And maybe it's not for 10 years, maybe you wait till your husband's dead, and then you realize that now's the time to plan for the succession. So you apply for guardianship and you have the sister join with you so that when you're gone, she's there, that kind of thing.
Yeah, see, I've been telling parents to get into this now because we have just the right amount of vulnerability. We have just the right amount that they're going down to the corner store and, the guy charged them 6 times more than what, you know what I mean? Like, now's the time to do it.
Yeah, in a lot of cases,
it's not too early.
We just don't sell it. We do it. We got several dozen on the go at any time.
I'm selling it.
But,
I'm selling it. I don't benefit from it, but I'm telling the parents, please, like, It's so important. I can see it happening just going into the store and the guy says, hey, you know, can you buy me a chocolate bar too? It's that vulnerability, but they're with us. So that's not going to happen. But it would take nothing for somebody to take advantage of them financially. And it has happened too.
Sure it does.
But, you know, it's happened.
That's one of the biggest worries that my clients have.
Click on this and we will give you $200,000, and they do. And next thing you know, they're in trouble.
That's right. So this is how you contact us. Karen, there's Karen there. You can see her. She's box is blacked out. But this is how to contact Karen. I don't see any more questions.
Nope, I think we've got them all.
No, okay, that's about all the questions. So it's 7:20, 8:22. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I'd like to thank you for inviting us to speak. And,
Thank you.
You know, it's a pleasure working with you.
And I hope everybody, you know, has gotten what they need out of this, but we will have another, what I would like to do for the next one, because Kenneth has helped us with the future, you know, and some now, but I think I have one more guest speaker coming on next week to help us with the passport funding for them getting.
That would be useful. That's a good idea.
Yeah. So I have that guest speaker coming on.
Can you send me the link? I wouldn't mind having.
Well, it's a parent. So it's not a professional, but this lady has gone up, backward, side, every which way to get the most money she can for her daughter.
There, you see, you've got somebody who knows more than most people, right?
With the wording, it's all in the wording.
That's right.
It's all in the wording.
Okay, well, I'm going to ring off now. If you'd like to do another one for the parents that aren't here, just let me know. If you'd like to do like an annual event, you know, we can always talk about that.
Sure, for sure. All right. Well, thank you so much, Kenneth.
Okay, thank
Really
you.
appreciate it. And thank you for all the parents that came, and look for an email for the next meeting.
And I'll see if I can find out how to turn this thing off.
Okay. All right.